What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode. Today we've got a really great cage trapping demo from the Williams Fur Sale. It's going to be with Bill Robinson. He's a good buddy of mine from up in Colorado. He's going to go through a lot of the stuff he does. Now, many of you may already cage trap and may be quite experienced at it, but what I've found is throughout the years, you go to these demos and you can always glean just a little bit of knowledge from every other trapper. We're always learning, we're always gaining more knowledge, and we're always sharing what we've learned throughout our seasons with each other to help everybody else learn something new. So he's got a lot of really cool things, and he's got some different perspectives because he's from Colorado, so he traps way up north, whereas most of us are trapping down here in Arizona. So we've got, desert trapping's a little bit different from what he's doing up in the high country up there. He's upwards of 9,000 feet. So his is going to be a little bit different, but you may end up learning some little tricks and tips from him. So enjoy the video. Let me know what you guys think of these cage trapping demos. I've been filming them at the Williams Fur Sale. We had a great sale, so if you haven't been to that sale yet, definitely check it out next year. We did really well this year. I think our average was up in the 370s, so really great for bobcats this year. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy the video, and drop a comment down below and make sure you give it a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the video.
Trap mostly in Colorado, but I trap Arizona too. I wanted to change it up a little bit. In the past demos, it's all been pretty much people that trap in the desert, so that's why I kind of did two different sets. Start out with, a lot of people wonder, I've done my scouting, where do I set my cages? I like to look for toilets. I like to trap along the rims of canyons, down in the bottom. Just pretty much what the sign is telling you.
You might do better with the microphone.
Yeah.
But how's he gonna do his demo with the microphone? Set it down, do it.
Yeah, I think I can. This is weird. Proud of you. That's better. So anyway,
You got it like it's an ice cream cone. It's the only way it works.
right on. So back to how I like to set
Close
up
to your mouth.
the cage here. So a typical Arizona set, I like to use sand like Jim, and I like to put a bunch right out in front of the cage too, so you can see the tracks, see what's going on. So back to like where I would set. So in Arizona, what I was finding was the cats were all trapping in washes, pretty much. I basically started using Onyx and trying to find all the washes where
Bill, up against your mouth.
2 or 3 would come together. Instead of just trapping a single wash, you might as well put a cage where 2 or 3 meet in the wash. Then you're covering a whole lot bigger area. I came out for 2 weeks this season, put 46 cages out, caught 27 critters in 12 days. And it was an area I'd never been before. So it's all about reading the sign, finding the toilets, and knowing that you're in an area that's hold cats, first of all. The other thing that's real important when you're setting your cages is you got to know what the wind direction is doing, especially in the evening. You want to position that cage so if that breeze or barometric pressure or whatever coming off of the mountains down through the door is blowing through the back of the cage. You want that lure set to go out the door. You want to pull them to the door. So once I get my area figured out, I get my cage set, I make sure the wind is correct. Something I did this year, a lot of guys use a Y-stick for your lure, put it in the back of the cage. What I found in Arizona, as opposed to Colorado, in Colorado I lure once a week. With the colder climate and that, the smell stays there, it doesn't dry out. The first week here in Arizona where I struggled is That lure's drying up on that stick in 2 days. It's like jerky. Doesn't hardly even smell in there. So when I was here, I was literally luring every other day. So to start out, what I like to do here in the desert set is I bought these little cat toys at Walmart for $1. And what I was doing was I was drilling a hole in the center of it and putting my lure inside that rather than using a stick to the top. And it seemed not to dry out as fast. I had good luck this year with these, just got these little purple boas, put an eye on them, whether it made any difference or not. But I just looped it on the cage so that the wind can freely move it around. You gotta have movement in your cage. If everything's just sitting at a standstill, you know, cats curious. They want to see something move. So typically when I'm setting up my cage, I like to take some tinsel and a wad of like white chicken feathers, and I make a bed back in the back of the cage. That way they're looking up and down as they come in the cage. They're not just focused on one thing, just to kind of distract them from the pan. I always collect my scat when I find it, and it goes in every cage. Every time I set a cage, I put the scat. And typically, especially if you're finding a toilet, what I say by a toilet, some people might not actually find them, but some of the places I found, you'll find places on the rims of canyons where a draw comes out and there's big trees. I found some toilets this year that had 50 in it, all around the tree. I've found that cats will return to that spot, other cats will use that spot, so it's always a good place to put a cage. I caught 3 cats this year down here in Arizona that were right on a toilet. I mean, just literally a foot away. So what I like to do is I put them in the cage, and they also act like a sponge. So typically what I'll do is I'll buy 4 bottles of Mercer's lead-in scent, and I'll mix it with a gallon of urine. So essentially I come up with, you know, about 2 gallons for the season. And that usually will last. And then I add to this as I catch cats. You know, you always replenish them. So what I typically do is I got a spray bottle. I already have this mixed 50-50. And what I'll do is I like to, I'll make a line from my feathers all the way up the middle to inside the cage. And then I make sure that I moisten up the turds too with the key. It seems to hold it like a sponge. Freshen them up. A lot of times they're all dried up and old. That's pretty typical for my Arizona set. Cover the pan so they don't see it. My flagging, what I like to do, I don't like to attach them to the cage. I know some guys like to put them on the door. In Colorado, we can use game cameras, so I've seen a lot of times in the past that cat comes up, he's so interested in that feather that he's batting it around, he's hitting the door. Mercer's cages, you know, they can take quite a bit before the door goes down. A lot of other cages, they sit on a pin. Even the wind can blow the door down. So I don't ever hook anything directly to my door. I just don't like that chance. I don't want them to close the door and not go in, get scared or whatever. So what I typically do is I just use a wire, put a loop in it. You put a loop in there, that wind's going to blow that all over the place. So technically I would have this tied to a tree branch or a bush or something, and I'd have it out in front of the cage. So it's still bringing them to the front of the door, but it's not back here where they're going to mess with the door. Then I have 12-foot steel rods, quarter-inch rods, stick in the ground real easy. And I'll do the same thing as this, but way up high, you know, for a long distance call. Get them to the area, then they see this one, and they see everything here. I guess that's really about Yeah, on the Arizona sets, on the low elevation sets. Any questions about that?
Do you ever use the little chirpers or noise makers?
Absolutely. Especially if I have a refusal. You know, everybody's going to have a refusal, even if everything's set up right. Some cats just don't want to go. A lot of times, if you're not out in an open area where you can put a good flag out, they can see real good. If you're down in a tight area, absolutely they'll use a squawker in there. I've had good luck. And that's another tool, like I say, if I've got my cage set right and everything's going good, but this cat's just not coming in, I'll start to throw the kitchen sink at him, and that's going to include that squawker, maybe change up the lure. Another thing I don't like to do, and I know some guys do and they have luck with it, so if it works for you, do it. I try not to use more than one lure at a time per cage. If you're putting 3 lures in there at a time, I think all the different smells and stuff maybe confuses that cat. The biggest reason I don't do it too is I like to keep track of what lures I'm catching the most cats with. If you're just throwing the same lure, 3 different ones in every cage, how do you know which one's working and which one's not? I may use one lure in this cage and use a different one in this one, and I try and keep track of that.
The squeaker, the little green.
Yeah.
That's what you're using. And you put it in the back there underneath the trap or what?
So this is my typical set where I'm at home, I'm covering up pretty good for the snow and everything. I would just tuck it up underneath the brush back here in the back. And I try to keep enough foliage. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they come around the back and pull it?
They may, but I think once they pick up that smell, I think the squawker's really just to really home them in on the cage. Another thing that I like to do, this is kind of a weird tool. Most people don't think of this as a trapper's tool. But I know you've seen Jim show this. I showed him that trick. So there's those of you that like to catch skunks, and there's those of you that don't. I hate skunks. I don't want them in my cage or on my cage. I don't harvest them. I don't do anything with them. Where I typically hunt, trap, we don't have as many cats. So you've got to take advantage of the opportunity when it comes. Typically, if we find fresh tracks, it's 10 days, 8-10 days before that cat comes back. So we're not moving our cages near as much as y'all might do here. So I don't want a skunk in my cage. Anytime I've ever had a skunk spray in my cage, I've never caught a cat. It kills me. In my opinion, and you got to pull that cage, wash it, get all new brush, put new dirt in it. That's a big hassle. And if there's a skunk in your cage, you're not going to catch a bobcat. So typically what I'll do if I catch a skunk is I'll ease up to the cage, take your time. If it takes you 10-15 minutes, that's better than having to deal with it after. But I will sneak up there and open the door, and I'll cautiously come around the back of the cage. When he's not excited, you take this blower, when he sticks his face right up against the back of that cage, you hit him full bore right in the face. That skunk will run out of that cage and he'll never spray. I dispatch him when he's 50 yards away from my cage. And that way I haven't disrupted my cage. This has 2 purposes though. If there's no more questions about this, I'll move on to this other set. So I know in the past all the demos have pretty much been for guys that are trapping lower elevations, sandy elevations. There's a lot of guys that trap up here around Williams, Flagstaff, that have to deal with the snow like I do. This has been my most valuable tool. When I get snow, I get a foot, 2 foot, whatever. I get a lot of snow at a time. And if you don't keep up on it, you're just going to have a trap covered in snow, full of snow. I'm real anal that way. I don't want any snow on my cage, around my cage, in my cage. I seldom ever will lose a cat because my cage is froze or my pen is froze. I want my cage in the winter to look like this. a warming deal. But with this blower, so this is typically my set, you know, for Colorado. I brush it in really heavy, keep the snow out as much as you can. I don't like to use a bag because, again, I'm getting so much snow. Then the next morning, the sun's out, everything's melting off. Now you have all that water running down the cage and going up by your pan, possibly your door. Just a little blower for anybody that has to deal with the snow. You can go in there in a matter of a minute and blow all the snow off of the tree that you might be under. You can blow all the snow off of your brush. I'll get down here in the middle and I'll hold it above my dirt so I don't blow all my dirt out of the cage and literally get all that snow out of it. So even when I got snow piled all around me, my cage will look like this. Then you know your pan's not frozen. You know that when you leave for the night and come back and the snow's more, that cage is still going to catch a cat. So this, to me, is really valuable. Even if you're a whole trapper, and you have your set, you can blow off the top without ever disturbing anything. Your scent, your lure, nothing. So I really like that tool. Another secret that I do, the guys that are trapping up in the higher elevations, usually you're by the ponderosas or junipers or pinyon trees or something. So what I like to use in my bottom, this is just a mixture of like what you would dig down, a few inches under the pine tree. You find this kind of mossy mixture with dirt. So when it snows and rains and such, this doesn't turn to mud. It'll drain out just like the sand will. Another problem in the winter with us anyway, when we first set the cage, the ground might be thawed, so you can get dirt to bed your cage. As winter goes on, everything's frozen solid. You've caught a couple cats in there, and now your dirt's all gone. What I like to do when I set is at the base of those trees, usually it's the first few inches it freezes. Underneath that, it's still pretty good. So when I'm digging down to get my dirt, I'll literally dig a hole, get my dirt, and I'll cover it up with just some light stuff, top stuff that you're not using. All winter long, that hole won't freeze. So you can go back in there and you can get you some more dirt as you need it to replenish your cage. Just something that I do. You can see, the Arizona set, you pretty much are using just something to attract them, something bright. In Colorado, we're allowed to use any animal part basically that's unedible. I catch 95% of my cats on a duck carcass. I have a lot of duck hunter buddies that come into my shop. They bring me 30 of them a week. And as long as they're breasted and the edible parts are gone, I hang the whole carcass. So that's the big difference in Colorado. We don't do too much of the foo-foo bright attractants. We attract them more with the bait. But same but different, pretty much. Another thing I like to do, my box. Got all these separate little containers that I can kind of keep them a little bit airtight, so they don't smell too bad. But in my case, I always have my lures, bag of feathers. The way I make these up is I'm just crimping a couple feathers in a ring terminal, and then just let that go in the loop. Sometimes, swivels and fish line and that, they'll get all bunched up and around other branches. I just do that, and it seems to work fine. Something I found a lot in the desert, a lot of these balloons that have been blowing around. It doesn't get much shinier than that, to put on a long distance flag. So I use this a lot, cleaning up the country too, Got my pliers, my knives, my wire. I use a lot of different lures. These are two lures that a friend of mine actually makes out of all my glands. I use this a lot. When Mercer's kind enough to send me lure, I use it, because it always works good too. Bag with some turds in it. But that's pretty much about it. Anybody have any questions?
Are you packing this sand in from someplace, or just sand there and you're using it?
So typically once you get south of Flagstaff here, you know, all your drainages, your washes, most of them have a sandy bottom in them already. So that was really nice. I mean, usually you can just wiggle your cage around and you've got your sand. What I learned really too around here, you'll catch them in the rocky washes too. I caught a lot more fox in the rocky washes than I did the cats. I noticed in the washes that if you have a mixture of sand and rocks, you're always going to see the cat tracks running the perimeter, the edges of the washes. You'll see their trails. So that's basically what I would do. Is I would try and find where there's a bush overhanging off the side, and I would try and get it up in there. That saves you from having to, you know, I would typically have a lot of brush on this, which you can find around here. But by putting it against the edge or under a tree, that keeps one whole side you don't have to worry about covering up, you know. But generally the sand, if I'm in a rocky wash where there's not really any sand, I go find some. Because they do not want to walk on the rocks, especially inside here. You don't want to give them any reason to not want to step. A lot of times I'll use like a gold classifier. If I'm in rocky country, to get the rocks out and just get the real fine stuff in there.
How far are you packing this stuff off the road?
In Colorado, I use a side-by-side because I'm basically going up the mountain a ways and then I'm hiking up to my location. So sometimes I'm 100, 200 yards from my vehicle. Here in Arizona, I was able to drive pretty close to the washes. So 50 yards is probably what I'm carrying. It's another nice thing about Mercer's cages, being able to put them inside each other. Cages I've built, much heavier, much bigger, you don't want to carry them very far.
Why won't the cats go in after a skunk has been shot and sprayed? Is it just too strong?
So in my opinion, it's too strong. Most of the lures all use skunk in their ingredients. But you think about it, what that skunk's doing, that's his main defense against predators. You know, and when it's a dead shot like that, I think it's way too strong. I've moved a cage 10 feet from where it got sprayed in and put all new brush and all new dirt, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks later I might catch a cat after it's...
So it takes a long time?
It takes a long time to calm down. And I've had people tell me I catch cats really good after they spray. But in my opinion, I've been doing it about 15 years, and I've never caught a cat after a skunk has sprayed my cage. So to me, that's real important. You know, if I'm not going to trap a skunk, I'm not skinning a skunk. I just don't want it in there.
That little blower will scare them out.
They'll run out of there. They won't even, you know, you can walk up and shoot them. Their first instinct, once they twitch, they're going to spray. That blower, I think, it just startles them so quickly that they won't think about it.
And they'll never spray on that.
I've probably done it 3 dozen times or more, and I've never had one spray. And like I said, I've got buddies that love skunks and they're all about it. So after he's 50 yards from my cage and I've dispatched him, I get on the phone and tell him what it is. It doesn't come out in my machine or my truck. I just don't want anything to do with it.
Don't they come back sometimes and get caught again?
That's why I always dispatch them.
You shoot.
Because if you open the door and simply let them out, they got a free meal, they're definitely going to come back. And they're just going to keep coming back. And to me, there's nothing worse than waiting all night and having your cage work, and then you go up there and the door's down and it's skunky. Because to me, that it might as well sat there all night with the door down. You know.
Can you talk more about location? Are you in the bottom of the wash or on the
So where are we talking? Like down here in the desert?
Yeah, desert, Arizona.
Okay, so I'll tell you, the first time I tracked this, what I did, I went on a little adventure this year. I took the last 2 weeks. I had a really good season in Colorado. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go down to Arizona. So I took 47 cages down there and basically went on Onyx and just started. I wanted to be far away from where Jim has been, if that makes sense. You know, I didn't want to be within 100 yards of where, or 100 miles of where Jim traps. I wanted to find a spot where I thought I was out and about and gone. So I'd never been there before. So the first thing I did was I got out. Do you have Onyx on your phone? Very important. So basically what I did was I just started zooming in on all the washes within a 10-square mile where I was. Everywhere I found a wash that had 2 or 3 fingers coming into it, again, that's where I would go and scout for sign. Once I found sign, by doing that, you're covering 3 washes instead of 1. You have all these different washes coming down and meeting into one. It makes more sense to have a cage there than 400 yards up, downstream in a little wash.
Yeah.
So that's how I started out. You know, I had a cage every place I could find a wash. They all had good sign running down. You know, like I say, the cats, if you have a 50-yard wide wash, all your cat traps are going to be around those first 3 feet along the edges. Usually that's where the softer sand is. But that's basically how I started. You know, I found the washes first. I went there and I looked for sign, looked for tracks, for toilets. But just knowing you're in an area that has food, you know, that they're hunting and it has cover, they're traveling in washes to stay hidden. That's what they're doing. And all your other critters, your rabbits, your quail, everything else is hanging close to the edge of these washes. So that's basically what I did. I mean, going blind, I just set a cage in all them washes, and then every day read the sign. You know, what are the tracks doing? Did I have a visitor? Did I not? You know, some washes are rocky in the bottom. You can't see any kind of sign. I had one string that went up. There was no sandy washes. It was all rock. So you couldn't see any sign. It just looked catty to me. You know, you start picking up on other areas where you've caught. And lo and behold, I caught 8 fox out of that line. And on the very last morning, I was very surprised. The door was down, I thought I had another fox, and I caught a beautiful cat. And this was a rocky wash that I could see no sign in, but they're there. You know, you just kind of learn what looks good to you.
What about location in the mountains and the pines?
So in the mountains, it's a totally different ballgame. We don't really hunt any of the washes or the drainages because they're 100 feet deep, and it's not practical to be able to get down and up and out of there. In Colorado, I'm typically looking for rock cliffs, canyon edges. I found a lot of toilets on the rims of the canyons, up on the top, within 20 yards of the edge. You find, if you're in like junipers and pinyon trees and things like that, ones that have a big canopy, they love to make that a toilet. And you'll know it when you see it. I mean, there could be 10 turds under there could be 50. I've seen some that would cover an area the size of this floor right here. And you know they're just using that area. You know, but typically in Colorado, the rim along the canyon is very good. And a lot of the cliffs, you know, they have a 20-foot face and then they have another bench under there. They love to travel those benches.
So the base of the rocks.
Base of the rocks.
Along the canyons.
Yeah, it's all about, you know, transition. If you've got an area that's all flat and now you have a big, you know, hillside that surrounds it, they're probably going to be traveling the perimeter of that hillside. You know, cats seem to always want to stay where they have some kind of cover, you know, rather than just out in the open when they travel. And in Colorado, a lot of it depends on how late in the year it is, because as we start getting more and more snow, they move down out of the higher country and they might be down in the creek bottoms. You know, they might only have traveled to the bottom of the mountain, but my Cimarron loop, it's almost 9,000 feet where I track typically. But down at the bottom on the highway on the other side, there's a little creek bottom that flows down through there. Well, when the snow starts getting really deep up top, they seem to work their way down and catch more cats along the creek bottom. say location's big. If you're not in an area that's holding cats, you're wasting time. You know, it's another thing that's different. There's so many more cats in Arizona than there is Colorado. I mean, you guys have like 70,000 where we have 15. So once my line is set, my line's set for the season. I'm not going 2 weeks in an area and then taking my cages and moving to another area. What I do is I have my cages all out, and when I'm in everyday check-in, when I come across a bunch of new fresh sign, I'll go take a cage that hasn't done anything, and I'm moving it over to where I'm finding a fresh sign. So I'm constantly shuffling them around, but I'm never pulling all my cages out of an area and going to another, unless I've caught it out. This year I caught out the Cimarron loop. I pride myself in letting, Colorado does not take a tooth or a jaw and really do studies like Arizona does. All they want to know is where your location was, whether it was male or female. So they're not really collecting data or really doing a whole lot to protect the species. I turn loose every female I catch, if I know. You know, sometimes I catch 40, 42-inch females. It's kind of hard to tell when they start getting that big. But I release all females. You gotta, you know, here you have such a population, probably doesn't make any difference. But I release all females, juveniles, of course. And this year, second week of February, I caught a cat every day, and I caught 4 juveniles and 3 females, which made me feel pretty good, because I've been the only one in that area for 3 years, returning females and letting them, you know, breed. So it was a good feeling to catch little ones, you know. That's because I did that, you know. So once I started catching everything that I released, I pretty much knew that, you know, the big toms were out there. That's when I decided, well, I'm going to go to Arizona. Let's see what we can do there. You know.
How big of an area are you covered with those 46 cage traps?
When I came down here, I was probably traveling 15 miles in 3 different directions. I broke it up into, I had my side-by-side and my pickup. And 2 of my lines were so rocky I wouldn't want to take my truck. So I ran those with the side-by-side. And then I had another string that was further west that was all dirt, gravel roads, and I used my truck. But I was pretty spread out. Like I said, I basically just went on the map and started looking at all these drainages and what appealed to me as a good area, and I just carpet bombed it.
Were you camping?
Yeah.
And how did you take care of your fur?
So, I kind of rednecked it a little bit, but I took a 20-foot enclosed trailer. I put an 8 cubic foot freezer in the very front of it. I loaded my side-by-side, and I had 47 cages. So when I got to where I was going to camp, I unloaded the trailer, threw a blanket down, threw my cot, sleeping bag. Of course, I had a big screen TV in there. But that's basically what I did. That became my camp. I had a generator, so as I started catching fur, I'd fire up the generator, get the freezer frozen, and I had kind of a process. I didn't want to run the generator all day and all night. So what I would do is I'd run the generator during the day, keep the freezer cold. It took me from 7 in the morning until 7 at night to run my line. Yeah, every day. It was constant. All my skinning I did with my lights at night was a skinning pool till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. But every day, so if I checked my string in the morning and I catch 3 fox, I didn't want them in my machine all day in the sun, so I'd run them back, put them in the freezer, go on. But that's how I kept everything good. I brought 7 fox home that were whole frozen because I might have caught them in the morning. By the time I got there that night, they were 3/4 of the way frozen, so I didn't skin them. But for the most part, I skinned all the cats, the badgers, and most of the fox while I was there. So when I came home, everything was in good shape.
Could you expand on the lures? You said you only use one. So I guess my approach has been one's a bait, one's a lure, then one's a long distance call. Are you grouping them all together? You're saying you're only using one set?
So basically, these are gland lures that are made out of my glands. That dirty cat, it's kind of like a kitchen sink. It's got everything. really stinky, really potent. So that's what I'm saying is I've got 12 different lures in my box. And if you go and put 3 in this cage and you catch a cat, you really don't know which one he was attracted to. You know, you're just making kind of a smorgasbord in there. Why buy a lure if it's not catching cats? Some lures do, some don't. You know, some do for other people and don't for other people. So this is a way to figure out, you know, what the cats like the most and use it. You know, I may have a whole string where I use the same lure. You know.
You do anything to descent the area where you set your trap? You know, your scent.
You know, I'm not with cats. I'm not really worried about it. You know, coyotes. You know, you got to boil your traps and everything, and they're real sensitive to smell. I'm a smoker. I'll be straight up. But there's a lot of times when I'm out there setting my cage, I might have a cigarette in my mouth. I don't think it makes any difference.
Okay.
I think where it makes a big difference, though, is if you're handling your lures and you have gloves on or whatever, you always want that in the back of the cage. You don't ever want your lure up around the front of your cage or the side of your cage, because that's where that cat's going to go. You know? I've had people ask me a lot of times, they'll send me a post, I got cat tracks all around the back of my cage. They're not coming around the front of the cage. Well, I'll ask them, you know, which way you have your cage pointed. So a lot of times you can have the wind and everything right and have your cage set perfect. I had this happen this year, is I had it under a tree, I had a big flag out, and it came from the bottom. He went straight to the back of my cage. Never went to the front at all, but he spent a lot of time at the back of the cage. He didn't just come up and leave. And I thought, what's going on? You know, I know I have the wind right. You got to realize that a lot of these cats you're going to catch during the day. Everybody thinks it's all at night. It's not. On camera, I got cats at 10 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. So what I figured out was that was a daytime cat. So during the day, everything's different. It's backwards. It's usually 180 degrees different. So even though your cage is set up right for at night, during the day it's going to be blowing it out the back. So typically what I did, back to the squawker, you know, he wouldn't come in. I went and took that cage and turned it 180 degrees and just set it right back down. I caught that cat the next day. And then I flipped it back the way it should have been. You know, so it's all about reading the sign, what that cat's doing, where he's going. But if you've got him coming to the side of the cage, front of the cage, either the wind is wrong or you've got lure up there. And you don't ever want to do that. Does that kind of answer your question?
In your opinion, instead of just switching that cage around, do you ever have sets where you have more than one cage in close proximity, or is that kind of a waste of your cages in your...
You know, typically like February is breeding season, so a lot of times you've got 2 coming around.
Right.
When I start seeing a lot of sign and I know it's more than one cat, I've been known to put 4 cages in a 30-yard area. If I've got the sign telling me, I caught a female last year, and when I got to the cage the next day, I had 8 sets of traps coming up to that cage, which told me that they were attracted to her, you know, they were following her. And I put 2 more cages within 30 yards, and I caught 2 cats the next day. So, again, it's all about what the sign's telling you. What are they doing? Where are they going? Type of thing. Seems to work for me. You know, it might not work for everybody. Everybody has little tricks they do that are different. But figure out what works and keep doing it. You know. Any other questions?
This area where you trapped in Arizona is pretty remote, obviously.
Yeah, I was really remote.
Towns close by.
I was almost 60 miles south of I-10. I was pretty close to the border.
Okay.
And the roads I was traveling, in 13 days I never even saw a car or another vehicle tracks on the roads. I got a little information from a guy that grew up in the area, and he told me pretty much when they banned the leg holds that people just pretty much quit trapping down there for a long time until the cage traps came out. I don't believe anybody trapped that area in several years. I plan on going back next year and spending a month instead of 2 weeks. Now that, hey, and then I'm gonna creep a little north towards Prescott. But yeah, there again, it takes time to learn an area. I tell everybody during the summer when you got free time, that's a perfect time to go. The toilets are still going to be in the same places. You can go find this sign, and then come season, give it a verification, make sure you still got a fresh sign in there, and then you're doing your homework. That was my hardest part, only having 2 weeks. To put 47 cages out, it took me 2.5 days. So 2.5 days I wasn't trapping, I was just getting things out. And then, trying to find a sign and trying to scout all at once made it difficult. The last week I caught a cat every day back to back. Once I started figuring out this area is better than this area, if I'd have had another week, I think it would have been a really good trip. Because everybody says, a cat or a cage needs to sit and soak for a while. I don't understand that logic. Because to me, if this cage is set 20 minutes before a cat rolls through there, he's going to go in. It's not like your lure over a week is traveling further down and attracting more cats. It doesn't work that way. I was moving cages because I was on a crunch and I wanted to go hard until the very end. I was moving cages around 2 days before season was over. I caught a cat. That area was hammered with tracks. It was set on a toilet. The next day I was carrying 2 more cages in that I was going to put behind it, and boom, I had a cat. I took care of that cat, took those 2 cages, I went out behind that area and I spread out 2 more cages. Next morning I came back, caught a cat in that cage. Did the same thing the next day, further up the wharf, caught another cat the next day. And this happened 4 days in a row, at the very end.
You must have a lot of overlap on their territory.
A lot of overlap, here especially. Colorado, like I say, when I find a fresh set of tracks in the snow, that's a good sign that the cat's already been through there. It's probably going to be a week before he comes back. So when I put a cage there, I'm not expecting to catch it for a week. Because of the overlap you're talking about. We don't have near as many cats. Here, there's so many cats, I think the overlap is a lot. That's how Jim goes into one area in 2 weeks and catches 25 cats. There's constantly cats moving in and out and around. That's the advantage of here. There's a lot more cats. I'm glad I did that trip. I think it was the best time of my life. I just enjoyed it. Every day was get up and trap. Don't go to work. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. If I could do it every day, I would do it every day. It's special.
You ever have other animals? I had a cage this year, 2 occasions, something come and knocked the cage down, rolled it down a hill, and one of them, they managed to get the door open and
Get out?
killed my bobcat.
Oh yeah, mountain lions and I have a history. I had one stalk me in 06 and I ended up shooting with my bow that ended up being 3rd in the world. He's 227 pounds. And every year when I go trapping, I have a lot of buddies that run dogs for lions and they can't find tracks somewhere. I don't know what you're doing because I run into them every day. I have caught, last year Justin and I caught a 100-pound male. I have bigger traps that I've made. 14 inches wide, 20 tall, 40 inches long. I had a 100-pound male lion go in my cage. And he went in face first and couldn't turn around. It was that big. So, that was a little hairy letting him out. But I've had, when I was down here, for instance, a lot of times, maybe not so much here in the sand, but when you catch a bobcat, he digs a big hole out in front of the cage trying to get out. You know, and Mercer designed these doors so that they have something to do. If you have a solid door or a diamond cut door where they can't get their arm out of it, they're going to go crazy in this cage trying to figure out a way out, trying to look for a weak spot. The reason that Mercer designed these doors like this is so they can get their arm out and dig and give them something to do. I had one this year that dug such a deep hole in the front and then hit the cage enough where he had it like this. So what happens there is the lock isn't covering the door anymore. Went right out. I've only had that happen one time, but he got it in such a deep hole that the lock was no longer doing it. You know.
I suppose with your tractors, you probably plenty of them, they get torn up pretty good.
What's that?
Your tractors, they get torn up pretty good.
Yeah, that was a bad plan on my part. You know, I took 47 cages and I made 50 of those little purple things. And every time I caught a fox or anything, they destroyed that. So they told me they liked it. You know, but I started running out of them. But yeah, the purple, blue. So they say that a cat can see purple, blue, and green like we do. Otherwise, you see shades of gray. So when I try and do an attraction, I try and use purple, green, and blue, or tinsel, something really shiny. But yeah, you really never know what you're going to catch. You know, I caught a kid fox, 3 swift fox, 13 gray fox, 3 badgers, and 2 skunks, as well as the cats when I was down there. So. No, I was hoping that would have been the icing on the cake. But next year.
Do you do anything to secure the traps so they don't tip over or people don't steal them?
Yes. In the washes, you know, where there's really nothing to secure it, no big rocks or really anything, what I would find would be a big piece of driftwood or log or, you know, one of the old mesquite trees that was broken up. So here in Arizona, you know, you don't have this good brush, you know, to cover them up. So what I was doing was I was finding the black mesquite dried up sticks, and I was stabbing them in the sand, you know, on my corners especially to break up the outline of the cage. So I would put that on both sides and maybe a couple across the top. And then I was getting, I think they're mesquite, the long branches just have the green fern looking stuff on the end. They don't have any barbs on them. So I found, okay, this is something I can get without getting my hands all chewed up. But then I would just start stuffing that in between there. It's kind of a, you know, I don't like to see in my cage too much. I like to have them pretty closed in. I think if it's more like a tunnel or a hole, it's more inviting to them. And that's why I like to clean them out in the winter so much, you know, a dry spot. The back of the cage I tend to leave more open. More for the breeze to pass through and the lure. But to answer your question, you know, like in the wash or something, I would find a heavier log and kind of pin it up over one side just to kind of hold it. Back home, I'm usually shoving these under a tree or against a tree. I just like to put, you know, a big ponderosa next to the cage or something so it's solid on that side. And then I may find a big rock over here or something like that.
You ever tried putting just a small tarp around it so you don't have to put so much brush up against it?
Typically, I don't like to use a tarp. I think down here it's a good idea if you're not getting that much rain or snow, you know, because it's going to be gone in a matter of, you know, a little bit. But like I say, where I'm at, I may come to my trap and have 2 foot of snow on top. So I don't typically like to use a bag because that's going to melt quick. Colorado's weird. We can get 2 feet of snow overnight. The next day it can be 50 degrees and everything's just melt quickly. So now you have all that snow melting down the plastic, coming down here. A lot of my cages have a track on the bottom too. And where Mercers are flat, you know, I have a track at the side. So a lot of times, if you have your cage too in a depression, I get that snow melt comes down there, freezes in my track.
So around here it'll be alright.
Around here, yeah, it's a good
It
idea.
doesn't scare them off.
As long as you pin it, you take a clothespin or something.
So they don't flap.
You don't want it to flap in the wind. That will run them off.
With regard trail, do you like set a trail to your set? Like I had a couple spots where there were a couple feet of snow.
I'm glad you brought that up because I get people that they go on my post and they say, oh no, that's not good to leave a trail or footprints in the snow. I think that's malarkey. These critters, I don't care whether they're elk, deer, fox, whatever they are, they're going to travel in the shallowest snow and the easiest trail, you know. Colorado, the road that I'm tracking in with my snow tracks, even the elk, everything, they follow my tracks up and down those roads. So when I park my machine and I'm walking up to my cage, not only is it easier for me to walk, but I'm making a flat trail right to the door of my cage. If the snow's this deep, I'm going to have a trail going right to my cage. And I think it pulls them there because it's an easier path for them to walk and they're going straight to my cage. So I don't worry about that. And like I said with the blower, once I blow all the brush, you know, the tree above my cage and all the brush off and it's all cleaned out, I'll do a 6-foot area around the front of my cage too. That way as soon as the sun comes out, it melts that out too. So, you know, it just makes everything look inviting. It doesn't look like it, you know, I've had guys say, well, it doesn't look like the surrounding area with all the snow. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. I'd rather kneel in the dirt and the pine needles than 3 foot of snow. You know, sometimes you're going to get too wet or too thick of snow where the blower won't really do much on the outside of the cage. But the inside, it'll blow all that stuff out of there and it's just clean as could be, you know. You know, it's a big difference when you're trapping in 3 foot of snow or you're trapping down here in the desert. You know, obviously what you wear is different. I always thought you could trap down here in, you know, shorts but, you know, I can contest, you know, different animal, you know. But, anything else? Have any questions? No?
How about trapping their culverts?
So in Colorado, I don't have much. Here, I think it's an excellent idea. When I've been down here before, I know a lot of guys, you know, don't have a lot of time to run their lines, you know, and they're just running down the highway looking for structure. When I was down here along 17, a lot of places where the culverts were going into the road, and then I'd also find like a rock cropping or, you know, a transition phase. Definitely. You know, in Utah, they're building game highways.
Yeah.
Over the highways, so just the game can travel. And the culverts are the same thing. You know, it's a place for them to travel undetected. And typically, though, I think when you're around culverts and things like that, you're asking for maybe more skunks and raccoons and things like that. You know, like say in Colorado, I'm trapping such high elevation that this year I think I caught 1 skunk is all. You know, and I'm in cat area, so I don't really deal with it too much. Now, like I say, when the winter gets heavier and I'm down on the creek bottom, then I start picking up more skunks.
Yeah.
So I think your culvert areas, you know, you will tend to pick up a little bit more, but the cats are definitely using it. You know. But I think that's about it. Anybody has any more questions? I appreciate you listening to your ramble. I'm not much of a speaker, so this is probably the first time I ever get this. Thank you everybody for coming and enjoy the sale.